We have breaking news for you. Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich, who was given a 16-year prison sentence in Russia on espionage charges, may be on his way home. Gershkovich and the Journal and the U.S. State Department consistently said the charges filed against him were false. This is all part of a complicated prisoner swap that also includes U.S. Marine veteran Paul Whelan, who was also detained in Russia, also on charges the United States considered to be illegitimate. The detainees are expected to be in U.S. custody very soon. Nancy Cordes is at the White House with what we are learning. Nancy, good morning.
Good morning, Major. Here's what I can tell you right now. A senior administration official tells us that the parties have agreed to a prisoner transfer and that they are now in a position where they are expected to soon be in U.S. custody. This would clearly be a major breakthrough. Evan Gershkovich, the Wall Street reporter, has been held since last year, recently convicted of espionage in Russia. The U.S. has obviously always maintained that he has been wrongfully detained there. If he is part of this prisoner swap, that would indeed be a long-sought outcome by the State Department and by this president, who insisted that he would bring him home. Obviously, the second most high-profile American who is in custody in Russia has been Paul Whelan, the former U.S. Marine who was held there since 2018. And so we are awaiting word of who exactly is involved in this prisoner swap. The fact that they may be heading back here to the U.S. is something that that negotiators here in the U.S. and negotiators from several countries around the world have been trying to broker an outcome with the Russians for months, if not years. We'll have more for you, Major, as soon as we learn it.
Nancy, Christine Johnson here. As I think of these families and the news and the relief that they must be feeling, I'm also thinking about the Biden administration as a whole, the president's decision to drop out of the race, and now this news. I know it was a major priority for his administration. Yes. How does this look then for his legacy?
This would be a major feather in his cap because it has been so difficult negotiating with Russia, Christine. President Biden has long said that it is a top priority for him to bring Evan Gershkovich home, to bring Paul Whelan home. Obviously, they secured the release of basketball star Brittany Griner last year, and she came home to much fanfare. But these deals are controversial. There are some who argue that any time we negotiate the release of an American who has been wrongfully detained, it simply makes bad actors like Vladimir Putin around the world more likely to take Americans prisoner in the first place. And so, you know, these are very delicate, complicated negotiations. Sometimes there are months that go by where U.S. officials simply get no response from the Russians. For example, we know that part of the reason that talks over Gershkovich's release were delayed for so long was because the Russians were likely not going to be willing to seriously engage in talks until he was convicted. Now, obviously, U.S. officials say this is a sham trial. He never did anything wrong in the first place. He was simply reporting from Russia, as U.S. reporters have done for decades. But nevertheless, that is how these talks tend to go, that the Russians simply won't engage until they have convicted someone. And sometimes, in the case of Paul Whelan, who was convicted years ago, even then they are unwilling to release them.
Nancy, thank you. Major, this is major.
So there will be political repercussions, as Nancy described.
Yeah.
Sometimes these deals are viewed harshly. The information that we have leads us to believe that the person that the Russians sought is in German custody, not U.S. custody. We'll have to wait for confirmation on that.
Right.
One thing that is interesting about the Evan Gershkovich part of this, former President Trump has been saying, without any provocation, without any underlying justification that anyone can find out, oh, if I'm elected, I'll get Evan out. Well, guess what? That's now off the table. Whether that was politically relevant or not to voters in this country, we don't know. But for reasons known only to former President Trump, he was hyping this. Well, that hype factory has now been silenced.
Yeah, and to Christine's point, now Biden puts this on his legacy as he is on his way out of office.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll be hearing from him shortly as well.